We're here at the Arkadin Cinema and Bar in the Bevo Mill neighborhood for the second an evening of Worldwide Magazine, which was held on April 14th, 2023.
Let's get going. We are pumped for local access. My name is Devin. I wrote the Riverfront Times piece about Worldwide Magazine recently. I have a little preface. I'm terrified of shivers and teenagers and pot now, though. So, I'm a little nervous, that's why. I think that the best way to introduce and describe Worldwide Magazine is that it's kind of like the St. Louis Howard Stern show of the era, right? Especially because the host and mastermind, PEP, Pete E. Parisi, a New Jerseyan, came to St. Louis through the world of radio. Pete worked as a DJ at KADI-FM in the early 80s with Radio Rich Dalton. And even when he was off duty, Parisi would drive around listening to the programming. And if he didn't like something, he would pull over to a payphone and complain to Rich about it. We can also look at the technological history of Worldwide Magazine and see that it goes from about the mid-80s to the 90s, and that PEP, or PEP, is an early adopter of being like a content creator, right? He's using the first home-issued video technology to make the show. PEP was an amateur, an outsider artist. He was driving his county cab, and that's basically how he afforded the first camera. The original premise of the show was that you were going to be driving around with Pete in the cab, and he was showing you various things around the city from his point of view. In a lot of ways, public access then evolves into YouTube. As a recording and editing technology gets better, the internet opens up millions of more distribution channels, but in Pete's day, he had to shoot and edit and cut and put it all together and hand deliver the reels to the local access stations, multiple of them, all around town, every time he wanted an episode to go out. And Pete did that for years. He spent all of his money on it. And I don't think that our hardscrabbled Midwestern city ever really appreciated the artistic effort of the show, even though Jim did include a very good scene of Vince Schammel sending a letter to Worldwide Magazine, sort of giving it the thumbs up. It didn't come with a check. No official St. Louis help ever came to keep Worldwide Magazine going, and Pete's death due to complications with diabetes, as well as some questionable circumstances, is a really tragic one. The show, though, is a whole lot of rude behavior, but it's nothing that the Howard Stern show wasn't guilty of. So one thing to take away, I think, as we watch Pete lick a woman's leather boot on camera, is to notice the kind of freedom of expression that was available on public access, especially late at night. Maybe after you smoked a blunt, you were sort of lying on the couch, and just Worldwide Magazine rolled across the screen. But the key word here is irreverence, and Worldwide Magazine is primarily about giving the middle finger to all kinds of stuff, and saying all the shit that you weren't supposed to say in polite St. Louis society. The show visited local sex shops and acknowledged the existence of hard drugs, and depicted St. Louis in the 1980s the way it looked if you were standing on the street. Pretty awful at times. The Kings Highway Viaduct was literally collapsing in on itself. The city was in full tilt decay from disinvestment, and the historic downtown buildings were turning into parking lots faster than anyone could document or question or object to, and that really pissed Pete off. And you can tell that there's sort of a righteous anger at the heart of all of the joking in Worldwide Magazine. In 1996, for example, when Pope John Paul II visited, many St. Louisans complained that His Holiness drove a little too fast for how many hours the crowds had spent waiting for him. And Parisi's response was to express that in the show. He played the Speed Racer theme over footage of the Pope Mobile hurtling down Tucker Avenue. And then he cut in a clip of a Balkan soldier firing a semi-automatic rifle at the video, lightly suggesting the assassination of a Holy Father. The irreverence for the sacred meant that Worldwide Magazine ended up doing some progressive journalism as well. They regularly covered the Gay Pride Parade in the Central West End, as well as the protests that broke out after the Pride Parade when STLPD attacked and bludgeoned queer parade goers. In covering the Veiled Prophet Parade, my personal favorite subject, Worldwide Magazine, as a cast, heckled the VP, asking if he was trying to start a race war. Parisi and the crew covered Klan meetings and shot fundraising promos for the restoration of Tower Grove Park, did multiple episodes on the Great Flood of 1993, and interviewed attendees of the Louis Farrakhan convention. And they showed the comedian what Fred Willard around when he visited, and also covered the boycotting of the furniture store, Schwab Engel, which civil rights activists of the African American community accused of predatory lending. All along the way, the show features a huge cast of characters: singers, outsiders, pot smokers, dissidents, perverts, oddballs, artists, comedians, clowns. They all made up the extended Worldwide Magazine universe of authentically St. Louis people. It's hard to imagine it now, but for a time, TV rarely showed anyone who wasn't a movie star or a picture-perfect news anchor. Giving regular people time in front of the camera was like a fairly revolutionary concept. So Worldwide Magazine is very much a product of its time, and it's also an extremely valuable archive, which is why I am unbelievably thankful to people like Jim Varagona, who has, for years and years, tended the archive, digitized it, spent his own money on it, kept it safe from moist basements and all kinds of terrible archive-destroying dangers. As Jim told me for the Riverfront Times feature, the show is a beautiful mix. It's awkward, it's cringeworthy, it's sometimes terrible, and then it flips into being oftentimes sublime. Everyone should consider donating to the Archive Fund and subscribing to Jim's YouTube channel and the Worldwide Magazine Facebook page if they haven't already. And thank you very much to the Arkadin Theater for having us. Can we get a... Jim, would you like to say a few things before we launch?
Thank you, Devin. I do want to ask, I think Devin asked this at the beginning last time, how many folks first became aware of Worldwide Magazine when it was airing on television? Okay. And how many from the internet? So, pretty even mix.
Half and half.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see that. So what you're going to see tonight is some best of stuff. I try to sprinkle in some other hidden gems throughout the years. I tried to touch on most of the cast members. You're not going to see everybody because there's so many oddball characters, some of whom are here today with us. So a bunch of weirdos. No, we do appreciate them being with us today, and they'll be available for Q&A and stories afterwards. So yeah, we're going to take a trip through time, the whole 15 years, the rest of the cast, and yeah, hope you enjoy it. Woo!
Anybody who is on film in Worldwide Magazine to stand up and take a bow for us, please.
I do want to introduce everyone here. We got Dave Dump Truck Perry. Got Big Mike here. Who will You have Angelo here, who plays Uncle Nunzio. You saw him with the bushy mustache. Hung way low. Tim Kniest. And his wife was the wonderful Miss Kathy. And then on the end here we have Steve Bailey. Back here. Saw him at the very beginning. He played various Shamel roles, right?
Everything was a Shamel.
Yeah.
I met Pete because we were watching a show. I lived in the city. And Pete was still listed in the phone book there. We used to have things called phone books. And he was in there, so we literally just called him. And that was, he wasn't putting his phone number or anything on there. And so we called him and made, you see the difference between like Pete's hand-drawn, like title cards in between stuff. And then that's what I first sent to him. I sent him some of my own versions, but he preferred his much shittier. But one of the first show that we did was some kind of alien invasion Men in Black thing. My friend Randy and I, who we were living together at the time, and that's how we got involved with it. But we shot at the center of the entire universe, Brandon Gravois at the White Castle. And so basically, Randy and I were dressed up like basically Men in Black characters. And we had like this little toy ray gun, which proved to be the very first time that Pete had the police called on us. Because the people in White Castle freaked out, thought that we were, you know, flashing a piece around the White Castle parking lot, and all it was just a toy ray gun. The police were involved in many, many, many other instances with Pete.
Yeah, but you got put in handcuffs, didn't you?
No, I don't think I ever did. No?
No.
Not intentionally. Not by the police.
Club fetish. They're regulation police handcuffs. As Mickey said.
So let's build off of what Steve was saying about how he got involved. If you guys could all speak to how you got involved with the show.
Well, Kathy and I had moved back to St. Louis in the late 80s, 86. And I was watching TV one night. We got cable TV, so we thought, big time city. And I stopped on the cable access and I saw this guy dancing in front of those Shamel flower pots and singing this song. It was just so outrageous. And it was a big, at the time, that was kind of a big deal that they had built this overpass, and then the people in Soulard, they didn't want the traffic through their...
The 18th Street people.
Yeah, neighborhood.
While that was closed, a lot of people rehabbed those houses in there.
Yeah.
And then that extended 18th Street bridge construction took forever. And then when it finally opened up, everybody who had renovated their nice turn-of-the-century 3-story, 3.5-story homes did definitely not like the traffic.
No.
So that's why they blocked it off.
That's where I first saw Pete. I knew Pete from when he was on the radio because I used to listen to him. He was the nighttime DJ on KD, and he was so funny and so witty and so much better than most of the other DJs. So I knew of who this guy was, but here he was dancing in front of flower pots, and so Kathy gave him, who is, yeah, this is just great. We love this. So Pete had, there was a little brief scene at the beginning, Pete would have these gatherings at different places in the city, usually on a Sunday, and one of them was downtown at the Sarah Sculpture, near the municipal courthouse building. And at the time, it had gone in and everybody hated it, or, you know, most everybody. And so that was the first time we went down to something that Pete was having, and that's where we met Pete. And he liked us, we liked Pete, and Kathy got very involved with the show. She was like almost, you call her almost the executive producer or a producer. If Pete needed something, a prop, whatever, Kathy would get that for him. And she would help him a lot with different kinds of things. She did some of the taping, you know, that sort of stuff. And so she was very involved. And then, you know, I got involved through some of the more, you know, they only gave me the roles that required great acting skills. as you know, Stinky and Mr. Yup were invaluable characters in the legacy of the theater. But that's how we got involved.
I guess my involvement, I mean, the city of St. Louis is like one of the last cities in the country to get cable TV. It seems like.
And shit with the satellite dishes and all that stuff in the city was a nightmare.
Yeah.
So the first show I ever saw was, well, we were watching, switching the public access, and there's Pete asking people where the arch was. And he's down there at the riverfront, right in the arch. That's the greatest thing ever. So he always would put a P.O. box for people to write into the show. So I would come up with these outlandish characters, and I'd write these letters, like the one when Sammy Davis Jr. was at the telethon.
Yeah.
I'm the one that wrote the letter that said, you know, and I sent a prosthetic eye. To change the totalizator board, you know, Sammy cried his eye out. Send me back to Watt Davis claimed to be his brother.
We didn't get anywhere near Sammy Davis Jr. that day.
So I would write all these gag letters under bizarre names. So eventually, Pete had a show, the first show at Tyrell Park. He had Big George and the House Rockers.
Me and Angelo went to that.
Right.
That's where we met Pete. And I've been doing some video stuff too, and so, you know, we got along, and that's how we got together.
And so the first bit we ever did was, you know, Ruth and Big Mike and I showed up. We were sitting there. I go, I'm going to put on these Chinese-looking eyes. They'll be over in 2 minutes. Sure enough, 2 minutes later, Steve Bailey walks over. This was in the fall of 1987.
Yeah.
And you remember what question you asked?
No. I don't remember, it wasn't on video, I don't remember shit.
It's on video.
Yeah.
You said, well, how did you do with the big market crash? And I grabbed my crotch, and he's my interpreter, and he says, you lost big. So then from there,
It was downhill from there.
yeah, we got from there.
That was it. That's, we met him at the park, and, you know, he was such a strange character, and we're strange characters too, so we just got along good, you know. It was like a Mad Magazine kind of situation, you know, over his house. We go over there and stay with him late at night, smoke weed all night, you know.
You couldn't tell from that show that there was marijuana involved.
Me and Pete used to be on KXOK, and we were on there one night, we were high as hell, we were on there, and some lady called in and she goes, are you guys high?
Good time. And I never smoked weed, so I'd go over, and we'd go out after work, we worked the second shift, we'd go up after work, we'd go over to Pete's house. And I didn't smoke, so Pete tells me the greatest compliment of all. I like hanging out with you. You know, you're a lot of fun to hang around with. You don't smoke up all my dope.
Linda called the cops on him one time, and he come in and she goes, and he had a big mason jar full of weed sitting on cable there. She said, he's got a weed right there. And you know, all the cops like Pete. And they come in and they said, yeah, that looks like some good shit.
And if you notice in the VP fair, all those cops, you know, were surrounding us. Before the whole commotion came about, they were all going up talking to Pete, you know, because they were fans of the show.
Once, this kind of shows you, just a quick story, Pete was very funny. He was interviewing, and it might have been a different VP fair, but he was interviewing a policeman on the street who was in his car, and they were just talking back and forth. And the policeman, you know, he asked the quintessential St. Louis question to Pete. He said, where'd you go to high school? And Pete went, high school?
I want to interject a quick weed Pete story. Pete was in, what's that hospital at 40 in Hampton? Deaconess. He was in Deaconess. And he called me, but he asked me, and this was, you know, the guys talk about the P.O. box and the other phone number and stuff. That was once he really started getting swamped, and, you know, he wasn't in a phone book anymore as Pete Parisi. He was in a phone book as Frank Jamerson. Which I don't know where that came from, but he was at Deaconess, and he called me or somehow asked me. I went over to his house over Gravois and Sprague somewhere, to the apartment he was renting at the time. It was after he moved out of Arsenal, to go bring him some weed up in the hospital because he's stuck there. He didn't have any weed, so I take it up there, and that was really an old hospital. It had wooden sash windows and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And he's sitting on the edge of the windowsill, and he's smoking weed, and he takes his tray with all the dishes on it and shit, just wings it out the window. And he's smoking weed in his hospital room and throwing shit out the window. I don't know why he wasn't thrown out.
One time we were at the radio station, and, you know, we get high and stuff, and Pete left me on the radio, and he got on the phone making a deal with the man Russian for the weed. And I'm on the radio, and you can hear the deal coming through the radio. I don't think we're monopolizing.
That's fine with me.
We could go on all night.
Yeah, you guys got some stories.
So how'd you meet Pete?
I guess the first time I met him, I was doing a wrestling match one night, and after the matches, Pete and Big Daddy come up and asked me if I wanted to be in a video. And I had never done a video before. I was just a brand new greenhorn wrestler, and I thought it'd be exciting. But anyway, I did it, and he kept calling me back for other things. And the next week and the following week. So I kind of became a regular on the show. But the trouble was, I had an uncanny ability to piss Pete off. I mean, I could do things that I didn't mean to, but he would get real mad at me. And the one time I didn't show up for filming one day, and he said he's going to kill me off the show, which he actually did a good job of it, because he did a whole hour-long show and everybody believed it. There were so many people that saw me and they would go, I thought you was dead. Yes, I died. He did a 1 hour special presentation that was real. I mean, they showed my grave and everything. He really did a lot of good stuff, and I got a lot of. But anyway, I stayed with him till he was gone. But man, I used to piss him off. He gets so mad at me and cuss me. But I really enjoy the moments the time I had with Pete Parisi. I was telling these guys earlier today that I can't believe like 30-something years later people are still interested. You know, it's thank you each and every one. That's just wonderful.
He spent a lot of time on the wrestling shows too.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
He's already doing his public access show for free and dealing with double fucking helix.
Yeah,
I don't know if you noticed like that disclaimer that runs at the front where it says that, you know, we don't approve of the message or we don't do the, Pete was absolutely convinced that double helix was ruining his video by putting it in shitty low resolution and messing it up, and he just hated him. And even like when you see those guys when they went to double helix later, just trying to kiss their ass, try to get them to stop fucking with him, and they wouldn't do it. Even like one of the things I remember, we spent a whole evening. Double Helix had this big box truck that they wanted to paint like a graphic on the side before you could just buy giant wraps and do stuff. So we were down at Double Helix all night one night where they projected this shit on the side of this box truck, and we were drawing everything in with grease pencils so that they could paint this. And all the stuff that he did for Double Helix never mattered. They just screwed up his show intentionally because they hated it, they hated him, and they hated him even worse when he complained about it.
And I think some of it was envy.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
of the audience
Absolutely.
he had, and it wasn't a show that, you know, would run on public TV like KETC or something.
Yeah.
And
Pretty bad
that's-
shows.
That's where a lot of those Double Helix folks, you know, they were professional broadcasters, and of course they were good, there were some good ones, but they had no audience, and Pete had an audience.
Yeah, it was Worldwide Magazine, the wrestling, and Andre's Pit. That was the three good ones
That's an Andre-
on there.
Well, Carl had too. He-
Well, yeah. That was a little different kind of a show. That was almost like a radio show.
Does everybody know about the wrestling broadcast from South Broadway? And because that was on every week, well, every other week or so. Whenever you guys did matches down there, the following week, Pete would have all those shows on public access, and that was great stuff.
I mean, it was all tape. Pete never owned a piece of digital equipment. It was all videotape.
Well, there wasn't any then.
Yeah, and his technical stuff, when he first started, when you see that difference between those hand cards and the more professional looking graphics, it's because he was hand drawing all that stuff, and then Channel 11's technicians, everybody went on strike. So Pete went to work as a scab at Channel 11, and that's when you start seeing all those more professional style graphics and everything that's coming in. And when the strike was over, they hired Pete, and the guys who were on strike hated fucking Pete because he worked while they were all out on strike and basically kind of extended their strike. But that was the kind of guy Pete was. He didn't give a shit. You can hate him all you want. He's still going to work.
When Pete worked at Channel 11, one time there was a hockey game coming on. And Pete was copying one of his shows at the time. And all of a sudden, before the hockey game, here was Uncle Nunzio in my kitchen in my house with a big platter. And in the middle of the platter was a big deer head and rabbit heads all around it. And that's what everybody got to look at before the hockey game. I thought for sure he'd get fined for that. He was worried, yeah.
So, speaking of the audience, I'm going to take some questions from the crowd here. If anyone has any? Anyone? Yes.
I guess at the time, were you getting a lot of recognition around town?
Oh, yeah, you
And
couldn't
then-
go anywhere without getting recognized.
Yeah.
Really, you couldn't go anywhere without people talking to you.
And
That me, I was in.
One cute girl at AutoZone.
I don't remember ever.
no.
Well, you guys were in costume and stuff, so nobody knew who you
Well,
were. You know,
Yeah.
especially Angelo. Nobody knew.
Yeah.
Angelo.
There were people where we worked that watched that show all the time, and they were amazed when they found out Angelo was on way low. They couldn't believe it.
And I guess any interesting fan stories you'd want to share, or I mean, I guess I didn't realize there was fan meetups or something at the park, or?
Yeah, they had the first anniversary show at Dino's Bungalow.
Yeah.
And then there was some Tower Grove shows, the one with Big George.
The Dino's Bungalow was a little kind of a neighborhood dive bar, and that's where some of those scenes came in there at the bar where Kathy was singing 10 Cents a Dance.
And everybody else looks like they're dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Now the Stellar Hog, right?
That's right.
So, yeah.
But the show was popular then because I went down there to go to that first anniversary show, and you couldn't park
Yeah,
4 or
sure.
5 blocks away. Didn't
That
go.
was fun.
And actually, my first interaction with the show getting close up was going to the 97 picnic at Carondelet Park. So there were several picnics. I know there was at least,
There was one that was canceled. It was rained out or something.
but was it canceled? I thought there was still something that happened, and that's when the Horner Brothers showed up at the Stoned Pavilion. Yeah, that was at Tower Grove Park. I thought there was another one at Tower Grove Park. There were at least 2 at Carondelet. So like 3 or 4 picnics in the later years.
What was the Horner's name, the main one?
Tom?
Tom Horner. He was in his house in a recliner over there. He lived by River de Pere, and he was always drunk. So he was drunk and smoking a cigarette. He went to sleep, and the house burned down. He burned through the floor, and he was in the basement sitting in the recliner. That's what happened to Tom.
Well, and if you go back and watch the tribute episode, Pete and Vince, Marty, we talked about it the last time we were here, but they went to Tom's burnt out house, and they had to keep reminding people, we've faked deaths before, this is real. So,
I'll tell you another thing about Tom. One time the police got him or something, and they locked his car. It was his mother's car, it wasn't his car. And his cigarettes were in there. He wanted them cigarettes, and they took his keys and whatever, so he couldn't get in. So he got a brick, not a brick, he got a
Big rock.
a cement thing.
Yeah.
Cinder block.
Cinder block. And he threw it to bust the window, and it bounced back, and it landed on his foot and broke his foot. But he had to hand him goddamn cigarettes. So he picked the cinder block up and he threw it again, and he broke the other foot. He got the cigarettes, but he had 2 broke feet.
anybody else?
You know, one
Where's
of the-
Denise?
oh,
Where's Denise?
That's
Does
a
anyone know
great
what happened to
question.
Denise?
That's a good question.
There are certain people that seem to have just like disappeared, and they were able to disappear.
You know, there was Denise and Pete had a really volatile relationship, and
Well, how much of that is because it was filmed?
well,
I mean, we all
and
had.
because it was Pete annoying the shit out of her. But there was one episode where he just had the camera sitting in one spot in the bedroom. Somebody saw that one?
Yes, right after they broke up.
And they were, I mean, I watched that, it was almost like watching scenes of a marriage from Ingmar Bergman. It was so intense, and I'm sitting there going, God, Pete. But it was really kind of amazing. I'm glad someone else saw it.
Yeah, well,
Most
he
people
hid
don't.
the camera, and what I remember, I was 10 years old at the time. And I'll
You
never
shouldn't have
forget
watched that.
He hid the camera because they had just broken up, and so he dedicated an entire episode to their breakup. And he hid the camera underneath some clothing in their bedroom, and she didn't have underwear on. And so she was yelling at him in front of the camera without underwear on, and that was his revenge. And he, put the episode on like the next week. I'll never forget it.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, it was very raw, let's just say
It
that.
really was.
It's easy to look at Denise as being kind of a villain sometimes, but Pete was recording shit that most people is intensely private, you know, and then just putting it on television.
Yeah, right.
That's reality TV long before.
Well, yeah, and that touches on how this was a predecessor to reality TV. A lot of the extreme, like Jackass, Tom Green, some of the early Michael Moore stuff.
Besides the Horner who got hurt.
Yeah.
Was a Jackass like that.
There's segments in there with Fred Willard. Does everybody know that story about why Fred Willard came to the show?
No.
Quickly, there was a TV show at the time called Cable
Access America.
and Fred was the host. And people from all over the country would send their videos in. And this was, public access time when it was brand new. And so they would show these videos, and some of them were just crazier than hell, but some of them were good. Anyway, Pete sent his in. They liked the show enough that they were selecting the winners or the finalists for the grand prize. And so one of the things was Fred would come and spend a day with you. And so Fred Willard came to St. Louis, and that was a pretty good show. And the great thing about it was, we were as goofy as could be that day. But Fred Willard was so patient and so funny and just played along with us. And I mean, we were just nutty as hell. I remember we were down on Cherokee Street, and Dave kind of came into the scene, and I think he was real excited about meeting Fred Willard or something, and Dave took his head and headbutted a Post-Dispatch. Boom! And now Dave knows what he's doing, he's a professional.
He's busted that head open something.
But Fred Willard kind of went, holy shit. That took him back for a second.
He said that was the best special effects he ever saw.
So yeah, but that was a great day, and it was interesting to be next to somebody like Fred Willard, because you could kind of see while they were reacting to us, kind of how that mind worked and how he was setting stuff up. It was like a mini class in acting.
Yeah, I mean, that's an improv guy. Look at him in Spinal Tap, and a lot of those unscripted or mostly scripted.
After the show aired, Fred Willard did a funny thing. He was at his home in California. His wife was sitting on the couch, and she was just reading or something, and he was working a video camera, and he was talking into the camera about what idiots he met in St. Louis. These people were so stupid, you can't believe what idiots they were, just going on and on. And then he gets back and he says, okay, now I'll turn the camera on and give the real message. And of course the camera went on. But it was so perfect what he had done. It really was good.
And we have a copy of that. I think I posted it to Facebook a while back. I'll make sure it's posted to YouTube as well.
It is, he was just such a neat guy to be with us and let us do the crazy, goofy crap we did. Because all day, there's that little scene at the beginning where I'm talking. I did all day at Fred Willard. I just love you, Fred Willard, Scott. You're one of the greatest guys I know. Not that guy.
Yes, you are. I know. I watch every day.
It's annoying as hell, which was my trademark.
It's like when I was acting with Fred, he would say stuff to me, and I would just ignore what he was saying and say what I wanted to say.
A side story about the rabbits heads.
Well, I had these frozen rabbits, and I was trying to get Fred Willard to sell a rabbit signals, and it turned out his pet rabbit had just died.
And Mike had, Carlos, he went out to his car, and we all went out to Mike's car, Big Mike, and he opens the trunk, and what do you have, 8 or 9?
Bunch of dogs.
Bunch of dogs in there, and they're barking, and Fred was kind of amazed.
He was a little surprised.
And I think that was the end of the show, I think.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. That was kind of but that was just a great experience to be around with.
Another bloody wrestling story. I don't know if it didn't get filmed, but we were at Venice Cafe one night with Big Daddy and the great and late Wayne St. Wayne, aka Dr. Blood, was doing some poetry, And the point was that Big Daddy was supposedly biting his head, but he bladed his head and he's dripping. It was the goriest thing I ever saw in my life. He's just got blood just running down his face, and he's trying to read this poem, and he's trying to wipe the blood out of his eyes as he's reading this awful poem. It was the goriest, grossest thing I ever saw in person. Intentionally, I mean, not an accident. The guy's just gore.
We used to do the wrestling show, and I'd interview Dave. Nobody had wrestled or anything. I'd interviewed him before. Oh yeah, I'm gonna kick his ass with it. And then Dave would go in and he'd stick his head in the toilet and he'd come out and he'd act like the wrestler. He had already wrestled. I got cheated! I got cheated! And he'd go out and wrestle.
We'd have all the filming done before the match even started.
And I always had special glasses because they would always slap me but it would knock my glasses off. So I had special glasses.
That slapped you a few good times.
Oh, that's when you saw God.
Yeah, when I saw God, and he told me I would always be victorious.
Right.
By the way, I've never lost a wrestling match ever.
Hey, Dave, what was the deal with the liver match?
The liver match.
How did you come up with the idea of raw liver?
Well, at the time, I was trying to improve my show, trying to make some kind of a show. I wanted to put on a show for people. And I thought about it, and I put 2 pounds of beef liver down in my trunk before I went out. And then I got out there, eventually I reached way down underneath, pulled out this raw beef, slapped the guy and I was chewing on it, spitting it out the crowd. And when you take a bite of raw liver and you spit it out in the crowd, they will divide. They will, and they'll get out of its way. I got in trouble for doing that without clearing it with the promoter first. And I got suspended for a month or 2 down there.
I remember Dave standing around the ring, and somebody come, how they would hit him with a chair. But when they hit him with the chair, it opened up.
Yeah.
It was hilarious. The chair was open on his.
That was the Moondog Rover.
Right.
He hit me with that chair, it just went all over my shoulders, and I was tangled up in it. Gosh, we had fun in those days.
Big Daddy, the one thing that cracked me up is Big Daddy was a manager, and he's walking around the thing, and he would spit at people. Anybody would say, it's okay, it's stage spit. I don't know what stage spit is, but apparently that's okay if you're 90 years old sitting in the front row, you can get spit on.
It was okay because Big Daddy ruled the wrestling world.
Yeah, but when you were a cameraman walking around the ring, getting in people's way, they didn't like it, and they spat on you.
But it spit on the lens, too.
That wasn't stage spit.
No.
Real spit.
I've been known to spit on the lens a time or 2.
Yes.
Trying to get that effect of
That special look.
people sitting at home
That
thinking
soft
I
focus
spit on
on
them.
it.
Do you have any other audience questions? Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of started to get into it a little bit earlier about with the Jackass and reality show comparisons. Did you guys ever feel unsafe? Like, okay, it's time to get out. Like, while you're filming, was it like, all right, that's enough. We're done.
Well, the time they were shooting, they told Pete to leave, and he was taking his time, and the guy was a nut. And he went in the house and he stuck his hand out and started shooting, bam, 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 up in there. And everybody jumped in the car and took off. And Miss Candy said, I'll do a lot for this show, but I'm not getting killed for this show.
That was Pete. Pete, I don't know what he had. He had a thing about dogs that if he saw a dog, he would start yelling, Tojo. Tojo! Cujo! 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 I'm sorry, Cujo! Well, he did that to this dog, and this guy came out.
So the guy was a half.
Hey, leave my dog alone. So, okay. So, of course, Pete did it again. That's when the guy shot the gun. And then Pete's like, Mike Cosgrove, I think, was doing camera work. And Pete's running, let's get out of here. Let's get out of here.
Yeah, let's just go fast.
And Kathy was sitting in the passenger seat. They came in and just dumped all the equipment on her lap. And that's when she said, I'll do a lot of things for this show.
One time Pete went with this
shot.
crew, it was repossessing cars, and they were repossessing this guy's truck. And so Pete was sitting in the driver's seat, the guy that was repossessing was in the driver's seat, Pete was in the passenger seat, excuse me. And the guy that owned the truck, he pulled the door open, and he says to Pete, what are you doing? And Pete goes, gotta go.
We've had more involvements with the police than I think with anything, you know, tangentially dangerous. I was worried more about getting arrested between the White Castle incident and then the beautiful downtown Dupo IGA that we got thrown out of. The police were there too, but most of the time, like I said, when the police got there and they talked to Pete, they usually didn't have too much of a problem. But even the stuff we filmed in North St. Louis and that, nobody bothered us at all. But you can see, like, he would just let the camera run. If, you know, the same neighborhood kids that want to be on TV or on news channels that get in front of the camera and do that, he would just leave the camera on. Just like you saw those guys outside the city center. You know, he just let them run until they run out of steam. And that disarmed a lot of them, you know, or a lot of people that he would run into, even though he was not the most tactful person. But you can see he's talking shit to the people while he's there on camera. And they just would ignore it because they were happy to be on TV.
Yeah. I did want to say, the music in the show was really important, and Pete was brilliant at putting music to the visual, just great.
Plus on the editing.
Yes. And Pete also did original music for the show, and I helped him with that. I helped him record stuff and that. And I just wanted to say that I do have a SoundCloud account. It's under my name, Tim Kniest. But I have, I don't know, about 7 or 8 Worldwide Magazine songs on there, which you could download if you wanted or just listen. So it's whatever the SoundCloud is, but it's like Tim Kniest at SoundCloud.com or something like that. But there's some good songs on there. I recently just put Everybody's Elvis on there, which was he did an Elvis show once, and Pete would make up these songs, and then he would sing them, and then I'd go back and record the stuff, and try to make it sound like what it should be. Like downtown Maplewood has everything. Downtown Maplewood has everything. So I recorded the background with kind of like a carnival organ kind of thing. But just trying to do stuff like that. And but anyway, if you're interested in that, it's on SoundCloud.
Hey Tim, from the Miss Turnbuckle contest, did you do that music, the live?
Yeah.
Was that live or was that pre-recorded?
No, that was pre-recorded.
That is some of the greatest music I've ever heard.
That's what I
I need to get out more, but thank you.
Amazing.
That one is also on the SoundCloud, and that was
really?
the Miss Turnbuckle contest. Was really an amazing thing when you stop and think about it, and that was Kathy, Miss Kathy, and Mickey Parnley. At the time, Mickey Parnley from Mangia Italiano. Yep. She and the pasta doctor owned the shop. They organized that entire thing. We had a wrestling rink out. Wrestling rink.
There's a ring.
Yeah, what we had out there, we had wrestlers out there. And then, of course, we had this turnbuckle contest, and Kathy was the MC. It was just an amazing kind of thing. And I pissed off, that was the day I pissed off Big Daddy. Because we had a sound system set up, and I was playing, and the wrestler, and I had this little keyboard thing that had sound effects on it. So when the wrestlers were out there, they'd hit somebody, I'd hit a cymbal or something. Or boing, or something like that. Big Daddy came over, quit doing that! You're pissing off the wrestler!
Daddy was not really very confrontational in real life.
No, and he
Save
was-
that for the wrestling show.
He was not happy with my artistic endeavor. But it was fun.
Well, me and Angelo were announcing that wrestling, and well, you were trying to be funny, and the boy, he didn't like it.
Oh, that's
Somebody else.
It's
doesn't
serious
know it.
business.
Yeah, they take it a little too serious.
Yeah, well,
And one other quick thing about the editing, talking about the other thing that happened between working at home and then working at Channel 11, when he first started doing his shows and editing them, he had a really early stereo VCR. Because what he would do is he would film the stuff on his, regular VHS tape, and then he had 2 decks, and he would have to do this editing between these 2 decks. And because he had a stereo, he was able to, the music would be on one channel that he would add, and then the original audio would be on the second channel. It was the most ridiculously complicated and time-consuming way of editing. But that's what was available to, the layperson in the mid-'80s. But once he got Channel 11, all bets were off. That's why you see so much shit, so many transitions and all that other stuff. He was just thrilled to have it.
I was over at Channel 11 when he talked to him one time, and he was sitting there, he was running the station, and they had just a wall full of knobs and little indicators. I mean, unbelievable. Look, and I'm talking to Pete, he goes like this, and he leaned back against that wall, and all of a sudden, they had a monitor that showed what was showing on Channel 11. They started going, oh, shit, he jumped up, and he started. We got a little trouble over that.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I guess I was curious. It's really interesting how stylistically the show does go in so many different directions, and like you were talking about, like the slapstick, absurd humor to the gonzo journalism to stuff that's like even this and like French New Wave or whatever. So I was just wondering if you could speak to Pete's influences and then also his like vision of how he saw the show as he created it and what he thought of it throughout the years.
But that's the way his mind worked. We look at different things. And then also, people would bring things to him. So that's how a lot of different stuff would wind up in the shows also. But, he was open about anything. That you just go around and whatever you see, you just grab it, and that's what he would do.
And Pete could be a very frustrating person to be around and work with, but
Kind of gross sometimes.
But he was, you meet certain people, and I'm not going to say he was a genius, but
he was a genius.
But he operated on a different level, and it was like he would see that kind of stuff, and he would know what song to put to that action and what joke he wanted at the end of that action. His ability to see what was going on and then transfer that to the mind in the way of a TV show, or even just a 30-second clip that he thought was funny in his own mind.
And none of this was ever written down.
No,
this was just, here's the camera, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
That was it. It was entirely ad-lib, just situational stuff, and that was it.
We're going, you get in the car on Sunday, because we usually went out on Sundays. Because most of us were off work. And he said, okay, well, we're going to go over here. And so you'd go along, and then you'd wind up wherever, You'd wind up downtown or something at one shooting, at one session, and then the other time you'd be in South County at the Starving Artists art sale. But, and you'd go anywhere. That was the other thing I liked about Pete. He would go to North St. Louis, he'd go to West County. He went during the flood of '93. He went up and interviewed people up on the Missouri side of West Alton. He did some amazing kind of documentary stuff about that '93 flood that you didn't see anyplace else. It really was some excellent stuff. But
yeah, because even though, obviously there was a huge news story, when you're talking about a 30-minute news program, it really even still wasn't getting huge chunks of time, you know, other than the water is this high, and just, you know, didn't talk to people.
No, he did in-depth, he talked to people and he, you know, went up.
It's
to
just let the
places.
camera run thing.
Yeah.
That's one thing I learned from Pete about filming my own stuff, was some of the technical stuff where he, stop turning the camera on and off. Just let it go and then cut out what you don't need later. And some of the stuff that would have been lost if you had turned the camera off survived because you just leave the camera on.
Yeah.
A lot of times people do things that they don't know the camera's on, and look, it's the best stuff, because it's absolutely
Yeah,
natural.
that's good stuff. Wow.
I think I saw another hand out there.
I got a question.
Yeah.
For everyone here. So, so my family knew Pete, to all of you guys, for a man who made so little money. He was a radio DJ, and he also was a cab driver.
The lucrative world of cab driving?
Yeah, right. So what do you think drove him to do this, to put in so much effort for sometimes something that was so absurd, you know, like this thing that came from such an absurd point of view, this project that he kept going for so many years. It was like super passionate, but everyone was against it, and it was like so, like just a tiny group of people, really got it and watched it.
I think it was wildly popular.
Yeah, but resonated with it, but at the same time, he didn't make any money, and he put in so much effort.
I think he
So what
liked
do you think drove him
being
to
able
do
to
that?
control the entire show. It's not like you're working for somebody else, like the stuff with WBIV, where you have somebody over your shoulder. He could do whatever he wanted, which is why he was so mad at Double Helix all the time. Because he's putting all this personal effort into this, and they intentionally sabotaged the product because they didn't like it. So that was the only boogeyman that he had.
Now, wait a minute, you gotta say one thing. Double Helix tried to work with him, but Pete was such a jack-off. I mean, he just ran him off. I don't know exactly what he did to him.
I said frustrating. Carlos is hit the nail on it.
And the show too, part of it wasn't as an artistic thing, he needed that. He needed that to be able to let that artistic thing out, you know what I
And
mean?
be able to do it all himself and not have
yeah.
input from anybody else or editorial, constraint on anything because of what he did.
I think also Pete was always hoping that someone would notice.
Yes.
And that he would get a real broadcasting or some kind of job out of Worldwide Magazine. I think that was one of his motivations. But I also think, whatever level of artistic achievement you think he made, I also think it was his art.
Yes.
It was him. He had to do that, just like any artist has to paint or do music or whatever. That was what he was about. And he was a unique individual. And I was thinking, coming up here, I was thinking how much he would have enjoyed. And everybody, like Kathy and Watt and the people and Vince that have passed away, how much fun they would have had being here with a group of people who liked the show. And Steve even mentioned this to me, and I thought about this last time I was here, is to see it with a group of people is totally unique.
I've only seen one other person my entire life.
Or there might be 2 or 3 or 4 of us together watching a show, but not with a crowd and people reacting and laughing when you thought.
We appreciate that laughter too.
People really think this is funny? Well, apparently they do. Or at least some people do. But yeah, I think that was his art, and
he wanted to be funny, and he wanted to. He was picking at scabs, that he like to open raw wounds on, you know, especially stuff in the city. And like everything we did, you know, Vince Shamel was hilarious as a mayor because all the stuff with flower pots and security and stuff. But everything we did was, you know, a relative of Vince Shamel's, you know, in some city job. But it's great that we have documentation of, you know, the city from, you know, good almost 15-year chunk or of stuff that just doesn't exist anymore. Or, you know, you can look at that fancy new Kings Highway bridge versus the one that Watt Davis was dancing across a couple lanes of.
We went up to the Kings Highway Bridge when they were working on it. I pulled up, he said, just drive in there, just drive in there. So I did. I drove right in and they were working on it. And they didn't pay no attention to us. We drove to the other end.
Like you know what you're doing.
And they had it blocked off and we had to move the barricades out of the way so we could get out of there. He didn't care.
Like talking about like the Variety Club telethon and stuff. They just walk in with a camera and you know, now obviously people record everything everywhere you go. There's somebody with a camera. But you know, you don't realize how that was, when you see somebody in I can remember like grocery store, like Schnucks, you could not film it. They would throw you right out of there. But that's why we got another police call was to the Dupo after a wrestling show at the Dupo High School. We went down to the Dupo IGA and we were talking about how Randy and I were, or I was a manager, or Randy was a manager.
He was the manager.
He was manager, yes. And I was complaining about the dog food that killed my dog. So terrible things to, you know, just walk in a grocery store and start accusing them of killing your dog. And surprisingly, they called the police on it. So the Dupo police showed up and basically told us to get the fuck out of
Dupo. Pete had a song for Dupo.
Dupo.
Which he took, the actual song, I think, was a song by Thelonious Monk.
Oh.
That was do.
Yeah, a lot of Pete's music was 78 RPM albums too.
So he just stuck that Dupo, but that's it. That was Pete. Yeah, and the music that he knew and used was just, his collection of records at home was just insane. And just stuff that you wouldn't have ever heard of.
Right.
Just incredible stuff. And he'd use it whenever he could.
I don't know where he kept all his records. I helped him move 2 times, and I mean, dude, where's he storing these records? One crate, another crate, another.
I think when he was in the one apartment, like, he was almost using the crates as like a support for his table or something. There was just, shit was everywhere. So that was, I can't remember what street, but that was the one I was spraying the thing.
When he was upstairs?
Yeah. Carrying all that shit. At least going downstairs probably wasn't too bad. Did you move him in or out?
Out.
Okay. I wouldn't want to have him move him in. But especially stuff like Tower Grove, because Pete lived, you know, across the street from Tower Grove, so that's one of the reasons why Tower Grove was so important to a lot of the stuff in the show. And I think he helped with that because, you know, Tower Grove when I was a kid was always like some scary place, even though, you know, my mom grew up in the neighborhood and spent a lot of time there. But that was someplace you wouldn't want to be hanging around. But with Pete, you know, you just go in there and have a picnic, and I think, you know, he really promoted a lot of the city attractions, whether it was that park or Cronolette Park or even the mall downtown, which was a nightmare mall. But that's the great thing about being on camera and doing all this stuff every week, is that you get to see a lot of this time capsule stuff of St. Louis in the late 80s and the 90s. That stuff, just a lot of that stuff doesn't exist anymore. Obviously, one city center does.
Was any of the local media at the time, it seemed like John Pertzborn was friendly to the show, but I guess was there any others that were for or against that?
Elaine Beats. Elaine Beats used to be a columnist for the Post-Dispatch around that time, and she and Mickey and Kathy, they kind of, around the Miss Turnbuckle stuff, I think Elaine Dietz kind of got into some of that stuff and wrote some columns about it. Hertzborn.
We had a party one time, and I know there was 3 or 4 Duke's people there, I can't even remember which end.
Paul Shankman.
Paul Shane.
Yeah, Paul Shankman.
Yeah.
He had a lot of fans among the Duke's people.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, if you, I mean, I assume sometimes you would show up and it would be covered by mainstream media. And I guess I just was wondering if they were like, oh, you know, kick them out of there, or were they really, no?
The Last Temptation of
I was
Christ.
just gonna say
That's
that.
what I immediately thought of.
Dion Lace.
Deanne Lay, yeah. Okay, I'll tell you the story about that.
Yeah.
I'm at home and I get a call from my college buddy. Says, hey, they're having a demonstration down at the Avalon, you know, about the Last Temptation of Christ. He goes, you gotta tell Pete to go down there. That's a great idea. I hang up and I call Pete. I said, Pete, you're having a demonstration down at the Avalon about the movie The Last Temptation of Christ. I said, you ought to go down there. He goes, why would I want to do that? And I didn't say anything for like 5 seconds, then he starts to laugh. then he calls him up and do the camera for him laugh.
Sometimes.
So we went over there and we were doing all this shtick, and here comes Deanne Lane and her buddies, and she's doing her report. So then Pete's on camera going, and now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a report from our crack reporter, Deanne Lane. You see Deanne Lane, and she's talking and interviewing somebody, and very slowly, you see this stick microphone.
That's a really good show. Bid.
Yeah, it was a good show.
Look at that.
He was asking those people, what do you got? You saw the movie and it's no good. Well, we didn't see the movie. Oh, you don't need to see the movie.
I recommend that, and the time dump truck, and you went to Club Fetish.
Oh,
That's top show.
it was good. I missed some of the best footage I didn't even get. Dump truck was up on this. They had some kind of wooden platform, and he was up there dancing, and the whole room was shaking, man. I didn't get that on tape, but I got a lot of good stuff on tape. And he cut his head again like he always does. And the dominatrix that was there, she was all pissed off because he was bleeding all over the guy. He said, "Oh, it's fake pizza. It's fake. Don't worry."
Yeah.
Stage
Right,
like stage fit.
See him with a dog collar leading me through the bar on my hands and knees.
Yeah. And then the dump truck would go to hit her, but then he'd stop. Oh, it was great.
That was a funny joke too at the end of that show after her and I were fighting and dancing at the same time. Pete says, "Oh, I guess they made up." 'Cause we was just
Right.
he could come up with some lines.
Yeah.
Everybody spending basically the day driving around.
I think, did you have a question?
Plenty of time to think.
Yeah, so I can't speak to everybody else who found Worldwide Magazine after public access television. In the pandemic, someone referenced Brandon Grabois, this is the crossroads of humanity on Twitter, and someone else said, you know, Brandon Grabois, I grew up here, and I was like, all right, they got to be referencing something. And I went on this spiral of Worldwide Magazine, and it clearly has resonated with a lot of the people who are here, who watched it growing up and who discovered it now, and I think part of that's because a lot of the issues like the driving report are still very relevant today. So my question to you guys would be, what was the impact you feel like Worldwide Magazine had on the local culture, and if St. Louis is worse off because we don't have anything like that today?
I think Pete would love YouTube, because YouTube would absolutely give him a bigger platform than he could, but some of the things Pete said sometimes were not very PC, even a little bit. So I don't know if he'd survive that, but I think that just his legacy of documenting this stuff is what is the most important part of it. Because I don't know if you look, like my mom passed away in December, so I'm going through all of her stuff and going through all these pictures. And if you think about when you're taking pictures, you're trying to just get the subject and you don't want background stuff detracting you from what's in the picture. But when you look back, the background things are the important things because you want to see what was going on there. And that whole show gives you a big chunk of a very transitory city. You know, you're going from the malaise of the 70s into the 80s wasn't much better, but then things started getting better. But, you know, I think just having all that videotape of all the things around St. Louis is probably the biggest legacy of his.
It was just a different time in terms of public access was brand new. People didn't know what to do with it, and Pete did. Pete said, "Yeah, I know what to do," and he, you know, and
well, he was from New Jersey, and the New York, New Jersey, they always had public access was a big thing for them. So I think when we got it, he saw that as an opportunity, like, oh, I know what this stuff is. I can do this. It's just radio show with video.
But you know, nowadays, things are so different in getting your stuff out on. In one way, you can get everything you want to put out there, but everything seems to be so tightly structured now. You know, you got to know this guy, or you got to do it this way. That was a unique time in you know,
pre-internet. You know,
broadcast history, because you had public access shows all over the country, and some of them would have made Worldwide Magazine look kind of mild, you know, because there was some crazy stuff out there. You can get it now because people can do YouTube and TikTok and all that good stuff, but you can't get it. It was just a different kind of way. Everything was kind of brand new at that point that we did.
Did you have a question, sir? Were you raising your hand?
Yeah, you guys had Bill Haas on there for a small segment. Did you guys have any other politicians, would-be politicians, that were featured on the show in any fashion?
There was, we were down at the Arch one time, and one of the catchphrases was, "I never watch Worldwide Magazine." And he got John Ashcroft. He may have been the governor.
Yeah, he was governor at that point, yeah.
And he said, I never watch Worldwide Magazine, you know.
And there's no way he was ever going to watch it.
And then he interviewed Freeman Bosley one time when he was mayor. But it was, I think, at a Cherokee Street parade or something. I don't know, it wasn't a big deal, but yeah.
Freeman was a little standoffish with Pete. It would seem like he would push him off to go talk to my dad or something. And
well, he knew Pete.
yeah, well, yeah. And there is an episode or two when Clarence Harmon was running for mayor.
Yeah.
And I think Pete interacted with him for a little bit there.
Well, and Mad Russian, he was very confrontational with a guy named Bill Webster, who was running for governor of the state, and he was Republican, but he was having some ethical issues or something. And Mad Russian, he was out of WashU, and Mad Russian jumped his case, man. It was like nothing. It was like old-time reporting, you know. What do you got to say? And they were like, get away from us, you know. They didn't know. So there was, you know, there was some stuff that happened on the show that was kind of interesting like that.
I noticed in the background, one of the places you were getting kicked out of, Darlene Green was in the background as y'all were being kicked out of one of those halls. Yeah.
I think that was at the Adams Mark or something.
Yeah, I think that was like a 96 Democratic Victory Party, something like that.
The one with the clipboard in front of the camera.
Yeah.
That's always a good look.
It's so funny, the camera just elicited two kinds of responses, either, hey, you can't film in here, or I want to be on camera.
Yeah.
That was two extremes.
Can I ask you guys, it wasn't on here, but I always remember and if you guys were involved in it, I want to know. There was like an episode where there was a clan meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Some super crazy footage, but were you guys on a sign for that one?
I was not there.
It was one of the odder, it's brief, but it was just super odd.
Yeah, I remember watching it, and you just sit there and you're kind of watching like, God damn, Pete.
Well, just one of those where
It was, it's the ballsy kind of
pretty ballsy to go
thing.
there.
Yeah.
And not that there's anything of substance in it, but I just wondered if you guys were there, because there's like weird tension, and it's like,
all those guys are in jail now. All those Klansmen.
oh, I don't doubt it at all.
They're all in
but just
jail.
that choice of that brief part of that segment, I was like, man, that's a pretty wild.
What was the guy?
And he wasn't holding his tongue back either.
No.
At all.
That was always so ballsy. He didn't care who.
That's what I mean. That's why I asked if you guys were there. Because
The one where he was out at the super religious guy with all the washing machines on his front porch.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't know if I can stand 2 seconds with that guy, but Pete was there for, forever talking to the guy and letting him ramble on. They had way more patience than I had.
There's a brief part of that clan one, which is hilarious, that he would just keep it rolling, where he had edited where they gave this big speech extolling their position, and then as they're leaving, one guy has to like swap batteries or give a jump to the other guy because their cars won't start. They just told how superior they were. I don't know what the damn thing's doing. And he's like, he's like, oh, look at this, the superior race in action. They're like,
That's why you let
it was a really great edit, and it's a brief part of one episode. It's so fucking funny.
Thank you very much for coming out.
Stand up, guys. Stand up. Come on. Let's do another. There he is.
Sorry, I got a little old age in me.
Yeah, thanks, guys.